The moment he confessed he had loved someone else the whole time, the entire wedding hall went silent, but the most shocking part was not his betrayal. It was the calm look on my face when I finally told him the truth I had carried for years. Before the story begins, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Vibes if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people who keep loving even after life breaks their hearts. In the thumbnail, the scene shows a bright daytime wedding reception inside an elegant hall. A young man in a navy suit sits with his head lowered, guilt and regret heavy on his face. Beside him, a young woman in a soft blush dress looks at him with wet, wounded eyes, but she is not screaming or falling apart. She looks controlled, heartbroken, and strangely brave. Behind them, guests watch in shock, including an older woman covering her mouth as if the truth has just shattered the room. The flowers, candles, formal clothes, and crowded tables suggest this confession happened during a major family celebration, likely a wedding or engagement event, in front of everyone. My name is Saren Vale, and I learned the truth about my fiancé in the middle of the most beautiful afternoon my family had ever paid for. The ballroom was glowing with daylight from tall windows, the tables were covered in cream roses and pale pink flowers, and every chair was filled with relatives who had spent the morning telling me I looked like the luckiest woman alive. My fiancé, Caspian Rowe, sat beside me in his navy suit, handsome enough to make strangers turn their heads, but that day he looked like a man waiting for a sentence. His fingers kept tightening around his glass. His smile appeared only when cameras pointed at him. And every time someone said we were perfect together, his eyes dropped to the white tablecloth as if perfection had become too heavy to carry. I had loved Caspian since we were 23, back when he still drove an old silver car with a cracked mirror and ate instant noodles in his office after closing. I was the one who brought him soup when his first business failed. I was the one who sat with his mother through her surgery. I was the one who helped him rebuild his career when investors laughed at him. Love, to me, had never been fireworks. It was showing up. It was remembering medicine. It was making tea at midnight. It was holding someone's broken pieces without asking who had broken them. So when Caspian proposed to me after 6 years, I said yes not because I believed we were flawless, but because I believed we had survived enough to be real. But on that afternoon, in front of 200 people, the truth finally walked into the room wearing silence. It happened after the speeches, when Caspian's father lifted his glass and praised our loyalty. Caspian suddenly stood up. His face had gone pale. Everyone thought he was about to say something romantic. I even turned toward him with a small smile, ready to hear a promise. Instead, his voice cracked as he said he could not marry me with a clean heart because he had loved someone else this whole time. The music seemed to die before anyone touched it. His mother covered her mouth. My cousin froze with her fork halfway raised. And I sat there in my blush dress, staring at the man who had just turned our celebration into a funeral for every dream I had protected. The woman he loved was named Maribel, his childhood friend, the girl everyone said was like a sister to him. She had moved away years ago, then returned 6 months before our wedding with a divorce, a tired smile, and a sadness Caspian recognized too quickly. He said he had tried to bury it. He said he had told himself it was old history. He said I deserved honesty before vows. Every word sounded noble, but every word cut me open because honesty at the altar is still betrayal if silence carried it there. He had let me choose flowers, taste cakes, send invitations, and stand before everyone like a woman loved completely, while another name lived under his ribs. People waited for me to collapse. Maybe they wanted tears because tears would have made the moment easier for them to understand. But grief does strange things when it is too large. It turns quiet. I looked at Caspian, at the shame in his lowered eyes, then at the guests whose pity was already gathering around me like rain. And I said the thing he never saw coming. I told him I already knew. Not all of it, not the exact words, but enough. I had known from the way his voice softened when her name appeared on his phone. I had known from the unexplained drives after work. I had known from the way he became kinder to me as his heart moved farther away, as if guilt had taught him manners love no longer could. Caspian looked up then, stunned, and for the first time that day, he seemed truly afraid. I told him I had not stayed because I was blind. I stayed because I hoped he would choose truth before I had to choose myself. I told him love should never need to be begged into staying, and marriage should never begin with one person feeling like a punishment. The ballroom remained silent, but something inside me became clear. I removed the engagement ring slowly, not with anger, but with a grief so clean it almost felt holy. Then I placed it beside his untouched glass and told him he was free to love whoever his heart had never released, but I was free too. That was the moment the room changed. Caspian's confession had made everyone pity me, but my answer made them see me. Not as abandoned. Not as humiliated. As someone who had finally stepped out of a story where she had been cast as second choice without permission. My father rose from his chair with tears in his eyes, but I shook my head gently because I did not want revenge. I did not want anyone to drag Caspian out or curse his name. I only wanted to leave that table with the last piece of myself still mine. The days after were not powerful. They were ugly and small. I cried into towels because I did not want my mother to hear. I returned gifts with shaking hands. I slept in the dress once because I could not bear to unzip it and admit the day was over. Some relatives said I was lucky to learn before the wedding. They meant well, but lucky did not feel like the right word for a woman whose future had been erased in daylight. Lucky was finding money in a coat. Lucky was catching the bus on time. This was not lucky. This was survival with witnesses. Caspian called many times. I answered only once. He said he was sorry. He said he never wanted to hurt me. I believed him, and that made it worse, because some people destroy you without wanting to, simply because they are too cowardly to be honest sooner. He asked if I hated him. I told him hate would take too much energy from the life I needed to rebuild. Then I wished him healing and ended the call before my voice broke. Months passed. Daylight returned slowly. I went back to work at the Children's Art Center I had nearly quit after the wedding plans became too demanding. I started teaching weekend classes again. I painted murals with kids who had no idea that their teacher once stood in a ballroom while her heart was publicly replaced. Their laughter stitched something in me. Every small handprint on a canvas reminded me that love was still everywhere, even if one man had failed to carry it honestly. Then, one rainy spring afternoon, Caspian's mother came to see me. She brought a box of letters I had written to him over the years, letters he had kept in his desk. She told me Caspian and Maribel had tried to be together, but love built on guilt had not survived the daylight. The fantasy was powerful when it was forbidden, but ordinary life exposed what longing had hidden. I felt no joy hearing it. Only sadness. Because sometimes people break a real home chasing a door that leads nowhere. Inside that box was one letter I had written after Caspian's first business failed. In it, I had told him that success would never impress me as much as courage. Reading my own words made me weep, not for him, but for the woman I had been. She was loyal. She was hopeful. She deserved someone who read that letter and became braver, not someone who used her kindness as shelter while loving someone else. A year later, the art center held a fundraiser in a sunny garden behind an old library. I wore a simple blue dress. My hair was loose. There were children's paintings clipped to strings between trees, lemonade on white tables, and music floating softly through the warm afternoon. I was not healed perfectly, but I was alive in a way I had forgotten was possible. That day, I gave a speech about how art helps children speak when their hearts do not have words yet. As I looked at the crowd, I saw people crying, smiling, donating, believing. After the speech, a quiet man named Oren approached me. He was a pediatric nurse who volunteered with our program. He did not look at me like I was broken glass. He looked at me like I was a whole sky after a storm. He told me my voice had made the room feel safe. That was all. No grand promise. No dramatic rescue. Just kindness, steady and unforced. Love did not return like thunder. It returned like morning. Slowly. Patiently. Through shared coffee after volunteer meetings, through walks where neither of us needed to impress the other, through the way Oren remembered which child was afraid of loud noises and which one loved purple paint. He never asked me to forget what happened. He never competed with my pain. He simply gave me space to become someone who could trust joy again. 2 years after the ruined wedding, I saw Caspian once more at a charity event. He looked older, softer, humbled by choices he could not undo. He apologized again, but this time I did not need it to breathe. I told him I hoped he had forgiven himself enough to stop hurting people with unfinished truths. He nodded, tears in his eyes. Then he said I had been the best person he had ever lost. I smiled gently and told him I was not lost. I had finally been found by myself. Near the end of that evening, Oren took my hand beneath the table, not to claim me, not to perform love for anyone, but simply because he knew crowded rooms still made old memories rise. I looked at his hand over mine and realized that the most beautiful love is not always the one that arrives first. Sometimes it is the one that arrives after heartbreak has taught you the difference between being chosen and being kept around. So if this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Vibes. Your support helps stories like Seren's reach someone who may be silently learning how to choose themselves. Special request, comment I choose myself if you believe no one deserves to be someone's second choice. And that was the thing Caspian never saw coming. When he said he had loved someone else the whole time, he expected me to beg, break, or disappear. Instead, I gave him his freedom and found my own. Because sometimes the sentence that ends your dream is the same sentence that begins your life.